So it's one thing to come up with a mission statement, a vision statement, a purpose statement, or some core values, and even some maybe standards and expectations of athletes or coaches or parents, but to actually put those into practice, that's what culture is, right? Culture isn't something that's on a piece of paper, on a website, or on a wall. Culture is what you feel, it's what you see, and it's what you hear when you are part of a team or organization, or you step into that environment. Now, in today's episode, we're back with Joe Brown, an athletic director in Colorado. And in today's episode, he's going to be giving us, honestly, a playbook, like a bunch of ways in which you can start to create a transformational culture within your athletic department or your club or your organization. At the end of the day, the thing I want to really stress is this is really hard work, right? There's just no other way about it. Like, to do something special, it's going to take hard work. And it's also going to take servant leadership. And I know if you listen to part one of our conversation, Joe Brown's the real deal. Like, he truly believes and tries to live servant leadership in everything that he does. Now, if you haven't listened to part one, please press pause on this episode and go back to listen to part one, because it's going to help you understand how to lay an important foundation. And that foundation needs to be laid before these ideas can be truly effective. Welcome to the Coaching Culture Podcast. My name's JP Nerbun, and I'm joined by my co-host, Nate Sanderson. Our mission on the podcast is simple. We just want to help coaches and leaders become better leaders and build better team cultures. If you're interested in learning more about our work as leadership coaches and facilitators and consultants, or if you want to explore our online courses and books, head on over to tocculture.com and to betsybutterick.com, our other co-host, who sat today's episode out. Now, while you're at tocculture.com, please don't forget to subscribe to our weekly newsletter. It's going to give you the notes to this and every episode of the podcast, as well as our weekly article. Now, let's get into the second part of our conversation with Joe Brown. When you think about, you mentioned the parent, the athlete, how are you onboarding them? I know you mentioned a little bit earlier in our conversation around the, parents having a parent meeting that, isn't just around logistics. How are you getting them to buy into this culture that you're trying to create, or understand what it is that this culture you're trying to create, and communicate some standards for behaviors for them as well?
We've made a big shift. And again, I'll credit you guys to a lot of the reason for the shift. Is it used to be just sit down and here's the information, here's where you get the schedules, you can't fail this many classes, here's your transportation options. And we threw all of that out and just focused on what we believe and what we're trying to influence within our programs and what you can expect as a parent and what you can expect as an athlete and what you can expect of me as the athletic director or our coaches, so that you can see these standards. And we gave some examples of where we had fallen short, where other places had fallen short of those, and why weren't going to allow that to happen to us now. And also letting them know that everybody's not going to have the perfect experience, and that you're going to come into some situations that are going to be difficult, and you're not always going to agree with me, but I will always have a conversation with you. And that wasn't the case when the early part of my coaching career. That wasn't the case in the early part of my AD career. It was, I don't talk about playing time, and then when I became an AD, is I don't know enough about the other sports to talk about why your son's not playing enough in tennis or whatever, baseball or whatever it might be. I'm not the expert. I can't tell you. To the second slide on our PowerPoint presentation is my cell phone number. And, again, we have 1,500 kids. I'm pretty sure every one of those parents has it ready. And I tell them, call me, text me. I will always have a conversation with you. And when it comes to playing time, I'm not going to be able to give you the answer of why your son's not playing. But what I can do, and it goes back to that rookie mindset, is I can talk you through how to have that conversation. And that was something that kind of just hit me in the face, is that, this is the first time for some of these parents that they've ever had to talk to somebody about why their son's not playing or why they aren't on the level that they're on. Well, shoot, I need to prepare them for that. And it's the same for kids. My office door is always open and it's usually full of kids coming in and out. Is, Coach Brown or Mr. Brown, how do I have this conversation with Coach? Like, I'm not playing. Like, why am I not? I feel like I'm the best player. Well, let's talk through how you're going to have that conversation, because if you go in and say, well, I just want to play more and it's all about me, it's not going to get you anywhere. So let's talk through that and be a little bit more proactive about what that is. So I offer that up to parents. I offer that up to kids that are a part of it. And when they call and I actually answer, and I'm not angry, then that word starts to spread. And when
Mhm.
parents schedule a meeting with me and they need to have a conversation about something and we talk through it, they're back up in the stands having that conversation like, "Hey, no, if your kid's not having a great experience, I went and talked to Joe the other day, and he's not the crazy mean person that you think he is. Like, he'll actually listen to you." And, not all the time, but it allows them that authenticity and it takes time to develop, that you have to develop a reputation of being accepting and being understanding as part of it and always living up to it. And we tell parents if it doesn't fall within these core values, then we're not going to talk about it. We're not going to fall into that trap of negativity. Let's try and find the positive attributes here.
Yeah, I just guarantee you, like, at least 75% of the people listening were like, "He gives his phone number away to 1,500 people? He's inviting 1,500 problems." And yet, what is special about you is you don't see 1,500 problems, potential problems. You see 1,500 potential opportunities, opportunities to influence, opportunities to help people, to have better conversations, to gain new perspective. I'm sure some parents talk to you and then walk away probably going, actually, I don't need to reach out to coach, right? Like, like just because of your influence, your impact, your ability to talk them through these things, like, and this is a mindset shift. Like, I think so many of us need to have, I think that's just awesome. Awesome little story that you just shared there.
Well, and hopefully people take me up on it, and they do. And I let them also know in the parent meeting that it's okay to call or text me and say, "Hey, Joe, this went great. This was awesome." It doesn't have to always be a help hotline. It can also be an encouragement hotline too. Um, but it was something, one of our parents, when we made this transition to less of, drill and kill and more of like transformational. I had one of our parents, and he's between his children. He's been to almost every one of my parent meetings. And he's a local businessman and just an incredible leader in his own right. And and our HR director. I invited both of them to our first fall sports parent meeting where we were going to make this big change. And I said, I want you guys to listen to it and tell me what needs to be a part of it, what needs to change. And as part of the conversation, I'd always say, if you need my number, contact me or whatever. And his name's Brian Stapp. And Brian said, Joe, just put it on the PowerPoint slide. Like you say that they can call you or anything like that. Put your money where your mouth is. And so there it is. And it's on my email signature line on my school email. Is I don't put my office phone number down 'cause I don't like to be in there very often. I like to be out and about. So contact me. Let's have that conversation and get ahead of it. I think that's best for kids and coaches.
Well, Joe, let me ask you this question because you've thrown around this word of wanting to be supportive of your coaches, and I'm just sitting here as a coach thinking through a scenario where, okay, everybody's got the AD's phone number. Nobody needs to talk to me anymore because they can take their complaints straight to the top. And what does that makes me feel a little bit vulnerable for a minute here of like, I don't necessarily know what you're going to say in those conversations, or are you going to have my back, or you like, and obviously I
Mhm.
assume that you will, but when you're, again, I think this is part of the onboarding process, but also part of just the supporting process with your coaches. When you have a parent that maybe has an axe to grind or has an agenda, how do you support your parents or excuse me, your coaches in those meetings?
That's great, Nate. And um, the first part of the conversation with that parent is, has your son talked to the coach? No. Okay. So here's our first step with that. Is this an emergency situation or do you feel like your son or daughter's in danger? No. Okay. So I want you to tell your son or daughter they're going to come by my office tomorrow and we're going to have a conversation about how they're going to talk to coach. And we'll make sure that they're prepared for it and they'll make sure that they know what's going on. When I hang up that phone, the first phone call I'm making is to our coach and say, hey, I've heard from so and so. I want you to know this and I want you to know here's their concerns. They're going to come and talk to you about what's going on here. And I want you to make sure that you're receptive. Do you have any questions on how you should handle this situation? Okay. Or if the parent says, yeah, Johnny has already talked to the coach didn't listen, he doesn't care. All right, have you set up a meeting with the coach to talk to him about the situation with your son or daughter? No, I haven't. Okay. Do you want me to talk to you about how to have that conversation? Because here's what coach is going to say, and here's what coach is going to need to hear from you. So, how do we set that up? Now, if you'd like me to be there, I can be there. And I'm telling that to our coach because sometimes you're going to get into a hostile situation where a parent's, really angry or really upset about a situation, and I'm not putting a coach in that situation. Um, so I'll always ask the coach first, like, do you want me in that meeting on that first time, or do you want it to be an opportunity for it to escalate if they're not happy? So again, it always goes back to we want to start those initial conversations because we want to teach kids to have that advocacy piece of getting better and to improving and if they're not happy to be able to have those conversations that they're gonna have to have in life, and also letting the parent know that you don't just get to jump to the top and have the problem solved.
Mm.
That doesn't mean that doesn't happen. And oftentimes when I tell them to go back down, I've had parents tell me, well, that's authoritative leadership and that's not, transformational like you say that you are. And they'll just go on and call our principal or area assistant superintendent or assistant superintendent or superintendent and then the conversation goes in a little bit of a different direction, but it's always redirect and I give them my number so that they know that they have my support, but I can also talk them through how to make sure that conversation happens correctly.
Well, you're in my wheelhouse here, Joe, because we present this at our parent meeting as well,
Okay.
that these conversations and potentially these conflicts or this adversity is an opportunity for that student or that player or that athlete to grow, right, in areas that they may not yet be comfortable. And what I love about what you're describing there is that you're not only coaching the athlete, let me meet with the athlete and help them to navigate, but you're also coaching the coaches because we can screw that up too. Just as you said, like a player can put their heart on the table and we can just think, well, you're not playing 10 more minutes. That's the end of it. And so, to be able to coach both ends of that and the parents, I think is such a proactive and clearly transformational approach because the ultimate goal, obviously we want resolution, but we also want all of those stakeholders to grow in that process. So I love what you're describing there.
Yeah, and by default, just being honest is to protect my coaches. As like, coaches are leaving the profession at an alarming rate, and I'll never keep a bad coach. But I'll also grow everybody. And so I want to make sure that I'm protecting them through any of these situations that are going to come up and helping coach them through it. We don't want to leave anybody out on a limb where they don't feel supported and the AD doesn't have my back. And, it's a constant conversation. And, it's kind of like evaluations. Like we have the end of the season meetings coming up from all the fall sports seasons. There should be no surprises in that meeting. We're having a constant conversation. If I'm not talking to an in-season coach at least every other day, there's a problem in either a text or an email or a pass by or a phone call. And if I'm not talking to at least one of my head coaches that's even out of season once a week, it's surprising. It just doesn't happen very often. So, we want to keep that continual so that they do feel supported in all situations. And support doesn't always just mean with parents. But, I'll be the first one here sweeping the floor. I don't whatever you need. We just tore down gymnastics. We have gymnastics here. We have the district team, and once a year we get to set up the auxiliary gym with gymnastics, and then the Sunday after the state championship, we get to tear it down and put it back up. And I'm right there in the thick of it. And so they see and they know that support. And the support is also at events. I go to every event that we have that isn't double booked. Now, some nights we'll have a volleyball and a softball game, and they'll be at opposite sites, so I'm at the home event. But if one of our teams is playing somewhere, I'm there, and that's for all 22 of our sports. It doesn't matter, and what it doesn't matter what is important, if you will, the important sports. Well, you have to go to the football playoff game, and well, tennis is down in Pueblo, which is about 2.5, 3 hours from us, and the individual state championship is down there. So it doesn't matter if football's in the playoffs. I'm going to leave that, and then I'm going to drive down to Pueblo and stay a couple of days to watch our kids there. We have one golfer that's in Grand Junction, which is 300 miles away. I'm going to be there and watch that one kid. And so coaches see that, parents see that, and kids notice that we're going to support them through anything.
Mm. So many amazing things that you show that you're able to do for your coaches to support them. I'm just want to dive a little bit deeper in the one you said, you're having these conversations with coaches, so that when they get to the end of the year, there's no surprises like, oh, by the way, we were really disappointed in XYZ, right? Like you're already having conversations to kind of coach them. As you said, they're not coming to you perfect coaches. And so you're having what I would call kind of coaching conversations with your coaches. Is there a certain skills, certain framework, certain structure that you use to have these conversations? Are they just kind of more organic? I mean, yeah, how do you approach those conversations with your coaches throughout the season?
We have to have already established trust, and they have to know that I have their best interest in mind. And the conversations then happen organically. Um, I was having one with our girls basketball coach this past Saturday, and his direction on what he was going to try and do with something I disagreed with, and I called him immediately. He had sent me a text like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And then we had that conversation immediately of like, "No, this isn't going to work. Here's what you need to do." And he sent me a text afterwards and said, "I appreciate you being direct with me on this." And he knows that I've got his back and I have his best interests in mind, but I'm also not going to tell you what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. And I think coaches appreciate that and that direct feedback that comes with it. So they happen organically. If I see a problem brewing or I walk through a practice and something happens or a parent talks to me about something, it's an immediate thing of a text or a phone call of, "Hey, when you get a chance, let's talk through this. How can we best support you? How can we work through this situation?" We have a formal process for evaluations at the end of the year of, I refer to it as checking boxes. And, sometimes coaches aren't checking those boxes. And, we're putting plans in place of how do we improve you and how do we grow you. So we call them growth plans. If a coach isn't meeting those expectations, and, ultimately, if somebody is on our staff that isn't meeting those growth plans and not improving and moving forward, and we do need to go in a different direction, it's not going to be a surprise. And I also know that I've done everything that I can to help grow that coach. And maybe they'll be a great fit somewhere else, but it just isn't going to work out in our culture and what we believe.
What I love about those growth plans is, you know, oftentimes I think you ADs get to this situation where they're like, "Oh, we got to make a change," and yet they haven't uh, put the time and effort in to really help them to make that change themselves before they get to that point. And what you're talking about there is like, hey, we're leaning in here, we're really invested in, and obviously documenting potentially maybe for some legal reasons, but
Yep.
it seems to be much more genuine. It's much more we actually do want to help carry you forward as a coach.
Yeah, and document is a huge word and a very important skill set to possess. I have a tendency to be very organized and document a lot of things that come with it because there are going to be those situations that come up that you have to make a change and you have to move forward on something, and you need to have that documentation, that background that goes with it. But if we're asking our coaches to be transformational, we can't fire coaches from a transactional perspective. We have to coach our coaches from a transformational perspective too. And again, I think it's a balance. I think, within programs you have to be transformational. And I also believe that winning is important. And with our coaches, I have to be transformational with them. And I also believe that winning is important. And I believe that the transformational pieces of it within your program will build winning as part of it. And that happens sometimes where you'll get a program where they're not doing it the right way, but they just have really good players. And it kind of sets a bad example of what you should be as a coach, but we don't let that be the standard. We let our transformation allow us to have those transactions of winning at some level.
Joe, this might seem like a silly question here, but I think, from what I've observed in the AD schedule, you joked a little bit earlier about kind of this perception that how could they fill a full day? And then you start to realize all the things they do. And they're like, how do they find time to have these check-ins and this organic conversation that you're describing? And you also mentioned that developing trust with coaches is so important. And I'm just curious, like, are there any simple go-to questions or conversation starters as you're building that trust and you're checking in? Again, I have a little PTSD at times where if I get a text message from the AD that says, "Hey, give me a call before practice," like my limbic system goes crazy and I'm like, "Oh my God, what happened? Who called him?" What I'm thinking, what did I do yesterday in practice? What did I say? And obviously there's history that goes into that, but how do you, again, if there's just a simple skill set of having good conversations, What are some of the go-tos that open up the doors to be able to develop that trust and have that ongoing conversation with your coaches?
Consistency is the first and foremost, and Nate, probably in your situation, I don't want to try to assume, but that might have been the first time that athletic director said, "Hey, why don't you come down to my office and let's have a conversation?" So immediately when you have those unique situations that come up, you're going to jump and you're going to put fear into it, and that's not an okay situation. And so you have to care about them more as just coaches, as people too, just like we do with kids. I don't care about Johnny, our starting point guard. I care about Johnny, and I don't care about Kelly Christensen, our cross country coach. I care about Kelly Christensen, and so I'm having those conversations with him that are more than just his sport. How is his family life? How is this going for you? How are you? How can I help support you? What do you need from me? How can I better do my job? And then so that when I have those conversations with them, somebody, a podcast I listened to you guys recently was talking about the sandwich and, the good, the bad, the good, you know, not doing that, but always being authentic with them, not saying, "Hey, you're running a great practice, but man, you really lost your mind on the sideline. Hopefully you can win that game." It's having those authentic pieces of it of like, how's things going for you? Man, coach, you seemed really down last night after the game. Is it just the game or is it something else? How can I help and support you? Unfortunately, our gymnastics program, not unfortunately to begin with, but we won the state championship this 2 weeks ago now. That's a 4 state championship our coaches won in 10 years, and we had the all around state champion as well. And we teared everything down, and then 3 days later, her dad had this terrible medical event, and she texted me to let me know that this had happened, and he ended up passing away yesterday. And she calls and she lets me know, and we're having this conversation about, how are you doing through this? I've experienced this loss before too. And it's out of state, and how do you handle a banquet, and how do you handle all these end of season things that are happening now when you're dealing with a loss? And those authentic conversations, she knows that I have her back in whatever it is, and not just related to gymnastics, because you have to care about them. And if you haven't built that relationship with them, when you get that phone call of, after a practice of, "Hey, can you stop by and see me first thing tomorrow morning?" It's immediately going to be a negative interaction because people are going to come up with guards up. So just like we ask our coaches to care about more than just what they can do for us on the court, we got to care about our coaches in that same capacity.
I think it's really, really beautiful. And I can just, and truly, Joe, like I just know your heart and can sense that and feel that. Like you genuinely really do care about your coaches as people.
Yeah.
It's not just talk. You care a lot about the athletes. I still remember my conversation with you and just talking about your joy of going to watch the athletes and see them succeed. But you also do some pretty interesting things with them, kind of away from the court, to help them to grow as people. So just wondering if you could speak to that, of how you're supporting your athletes in alignment with that mission that you have and purpose as an athletic department.
We've done it a couple of different ways at different schools that I've been at. And, I've only been at 2 high schools, but I think that each one needed something different. When I was at Roosevelt High School, we started a leadership academy, and I felt like it needed to be more of a book study, that they needed to be engaged in it, in reading and learning and understanding and knowing how to process things, and really start that from the ground up. When it came to Niawat, we're an IB school, International Baccalaureate School, and so a lot of our kids have very high academic standards and big class loads and a lot of academic pressures. And I wasn't about to add one more book to their plate that they needed to read for homework that night. So we've transformed that into our leadership academy, where coaches nominate kids from their programs, and they can be freshmen through seniors. And the criteria that's associated with that is a good leader in a good way, a good leader but in a bad way, or has leadership potential. And that's a criteria to get in. And so then they get in, and then once a month during our late starts is we have what we call a leadership academy. And it's different coaches or myself or somebody from the community coming in and presenting on different ways of leadership and different styles of leadership. Then we ask coaches to put that into their practices at some point in time where those kids that are part of that program can give that back to their individual sports. So they're actually using and applying what they're learning. And it varies on what we give to them and what information comes through that. But ultimately we learned is that, well, we have a leadership deficit. Kids aren't leading. Well, no, we're not teaching them how to lead. So how can we expect them to be a leader if we're not teaching them how to do it? So we needed to be more intentional with that, and we weave our core values throughout that process as well. Like for instance, last year, one of the things that we had an exercise that we went through was, what does it look like for you to show character and to not show character? What does it show competition and culture and pride? And we broke those down, and then we used them as part of our parent meeting. Of here's what your kids said. This is what it looks like to show culture and to show pride within our programs as part of our core values. Then we have a champions advisory team that meets with me. That's a much smaller group that we try to get representation from across sports and multi-sports. And those are more authentic conversations. What's going well, what's not going well, what are you seeing, what trends are you hearing? This is a safe environment for you to have a conversation with your peers and myself so we can make sure that we're getting ahead of everything. But what we found is we're doing all this in isolation, is that we're meeting with our coaches at our coaches meetings at 6 a.m. Then the kids are meeting on Wednesday at late starts, and there's no overlap. So what we did a couple of years ago is we did started our champions training day. And historically, that had been the day where all of our coaches, volunteer, paid, assistant, whatever it is, would come and we would meet and we'd have some sort of message that went with it or a presenter. We would do all of our required trainings and then have a meal together. And then we flipped that model a couple of years ago and we invited all of our Leadership Academy kids too. Now, all of our Leadership Academy kids are there, and there's about 70 of them. All of our assistant coaches, our volunteer coaches, our head coaches are there. And we spend an afternoon, about 4 or 5 hours on whatever specific training that we're doing. And then also share a meal together, and we're having those conversations together. Our presenter this last year was our deputy superintendent. She came and spoke on the 4 frames of leadership. And it was an excellent presentation that I had heard her give to us as athletic directors. And I thought, man, this would be great for coaches to hear and also to have our kids. And so they're having these authentic conversations together that tie right into what we believe. And it takes down those barriers and helps them see each other as people, and that you can have these authentic conversations and that they can see, one of it was talking about the political lens of playing time. And we gave them a scenario of, the star quarterback, who's, been doing great, but the son of the booster club is the JV kid and they think they should be starting. And how do you balance that? And we give them this scenario. And, the baseball coach is having this conversation with a couple of our cheerleaders and our girls basketball players, and they're working through this. And some of them at their end are like, I never saw it from that lens or perspective. And so it's really allowed us to be transformational in what we're doing and how we're building those things.
Yeah, I love it. You used the right word there, which is transformational. These sessions that you're bringing these leaders in, they're not about a transmission of just information. It's not just telling them how to lead. You're helping them to experience a transformation, a shift in perspective. Absolutely love it. Something is the question I'm going to ask you here, Joe, is around the community service thing. Remind me
Yep.
of what it was there. It was they were working with special needs. Is that what it was?
Yep.
About coaching? Okay. Yeah. So
So
let me ask that. I'll ask that question. Re-ask it here. So I just want to make sure that you were prepared for it. Okay. Joe, like another thing that I remember you sharing with me over the summer that really hit me was just you're not just working with them in like a classroom or in these settings here, but you're also giving them opportunities to go out there and to coach and to give back to the community. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, one thing that we've set up here is a unified program. I came to Niwot a few years ago. We didn't have a lot of opportunities for our kids with severe special needs to participate in athletic opportunities. And so one of the first things that we did is with our special needs teachers in our community was start a unified basketball program. And it was something that, that started at Roosevelt High School. And it was one of the greatest joys I've ever had. as a coach was to have the opportunity to work with these kids. And we have our leadership academy members be the partners as part of the athletes with these kids in our basketball games. So we started practices and we had them over lunch. And our star pitcher and our star basketball player and our quarterback and our volleyball player, they were all the partners that were a part of this and interacting with these kids that sometimes are sheltered. They're in their own classroom. They're not always engaged in the community and what happens. And now we've taken that opportunity and our kids are interacting with them. And it has just been an awesome thing for our community. And our state association recently sanctioned as an official sport unified bowling. And it's been the same thing where our kids have had the opportunity to come in and coach and work with these special needs students. And an example of this recently, we had a young man that came to us as a freshman and he's nonverbal and can be aggressive at times. And when he came in his freshman year, there were some worrisome times and some interesting situations that came up that we worked through. Um, but he's a senior this year, and one of our star girls basketball players. She's been a part of the unified basketball program the whole time and he's kind of standing off and we're getting ready for our senior panoramic. So all of our seniors getting together to do a picture in the gym together. And Jake, he's kind of standing off to the side by himself. And she goes in and says, "Hey, I've been waiting to see you all day. It is so good to see you." And grabs him, puts her arm around him. They walk up, sit together and sit there and they do the group panoramic picture together. And that wouldn't have happened had they not been given those leadership opportunities to interact together. And that's the power of embracing them and giving them opportunities to grow through that. Other things that we've done in the past is food bank. So when I was at Roosevelt High School, we took every Wednesday, we had a late start, and we took a group of kids from various sports, and we went to a neighboring town, and they had a mobile truck where they handed out food. And so for 4 hours, all we did was hand out food to our community members, and they had no clue that that was actually happening in our community, or that was that high of a need in our community. And so it really brought them to that perspective of, it's bigger than us. And this is the community that we're serving and we're helping with. So another thing is youth camps, and everybody does a youth camp. I understand and I get that. But every program is required to do one a year and it has to be free. It doesn't have to be for a couple of days. It doesn't have to be for, an 8-hour clinic or anything like that, but it needs to be at least 2 hours and it has to be free. And that's just to get kids in, to get them the opportunity to be there. Now, you can have a paid camp as well. I'm in full support of that, but you have to at least give one back to our community. And then we always give free admission to all of our home games, to any of our feeder kids or our youth sports program, our Iowa youth sports program, because we want them in the stands seeing what we're doing and being a part of that. And that also goes back to that little eyes and little ears and letting our players know that they're in the stand watching. So you want to make sure that you're a good representation of yourself and your family, and Iowa High School as part of that.
Joe, there's so much power in those examples that you shared there, just from changing the perspective of not just athletes, but even our coaches too, and the influence that we can have, obviously outside the lines of the court or the field. I'd be remiss if we didn't ask this question before we got you out the door. And that is, there are some hard conversations that have to happen sometimes from an administrative point of view. And when you have a coach, or when you have a parent, or when you have a player where there has to be some enforcement of standards, you've talked about everything that you've shared here today has been from a transformational lens. And I would assume that you're approaching those harder conversations, or those enforcement of policy conversations, from a growth perspective as well. What advice do you give other athletic directors in terms of how you've tried to approach those harder moments, still from a place of transformation and growth?
And those conversations never get easy. And I wish that they got a little easier. But as part of them, we're always direct. We're always intentional in taking the emotion out of it. And I tell the parents that, or I tell the coach that, is that, we're not going to have an emotional discussion here. We're going to talk about the information that's at hand, the rules that were violated, the conduct that isn't acceptable, and how we're going to handle this. And I'm not issuing consequences. I'm issuing an opportunity for you to learn. And so anything that we do, we always want to make sure that we have a learning opportunity that's associated with it. If somebody's using inappropriate language, whatever it might be, or they went to a party and was drinking or using drugs or whatever it might be that they shouldn't be doing. Yeah, there's going to be a consequence for that, and you're going to miss some games. But what's the piece of it where you're going to learn from it too, of having that conversation with me and taking an online course or whatever it might be as part of that. For our parents, if I've only had two that we've had to remove from our facilities for inappropriate behavior. And, they had to miss some games that were a part of it. And I've had to go two directions here. Kind of funny, not funny story. But one of the parents was had violated what we believed was our code of conduct. And so we told them that they were going to be suspended for, you know, 30% of the season, and they could return after that. But as part of their admission back into what we're doing is they had to take two courses related to positive parenting, coaching, and behavior, and then also good sportsmanship. So you miss those games, you turn in your certificate saying that you've done that, you can come right back and we'll welcome you with open arms. And I had a parent that told me they were going to take these fill in the blank classes, and you can't make me. I said, "You're right, I can't. But I cannot allow you to come back until you do, because this is about not just enforcing what's going on, but it's about learning." And that parent didn't. It was his son's senior year, and he never took the courses. And it was the second game of the year that he chose to make those decisions, and he never took them. And okay, well, you can miss the full year, and he did. We've had another parent that the night of that I sent it to him, and here's what we're going to do. Here's why we're doing this, and here's your learning opportunity to make sure this doesn't happen again. And they sent me the certificates that night, and was just overly apologetic. We all have bad moments and bad judgment at times. Again, I'd have probably fired me in my first couple of years of coaching because of my antics. Um, so we have to have an opportunity to learn from it. And we emphasize that when this is over, it's over. I don't hold it against you. It's not, I don't ever label you as the kid that got in trouble at the party or the kid that, got suspended for fighting or whatever it is. When this is over, it's over. And we still love and care about you as a person more than you will ever know. So when you come back, let's go. And we have those conversations with them. And I'm intentional in making sure that I follow up with them and with the parents too. Welcome back. I look forward to having you back in the stands here. And not hiding from those, because those can be awkward conversations and uncomfortable conversations, but always direct and always without the emotion as part of it. Because with the emotions that come with it, then I'm going to get agitated too, and I'm going to be overprotective, and I'm going to be jumping to conclusions. I don't want parents doing that or kids or coaches doing that. So I need to make sure that I'm setting the standard of doing that as well.
Joe, I just want to highlight, like, in that situation, even with the two parents, one of the great fears that ADs have is, well, I don't want to punish the kids because of a parent's behavior. And yet the parent made a choice to act against the code of conduct. So they lose these games. And then it's up to the parents to then again choose. They can choose to take the course or not to choose. And it's the parents doing it to the kids, not that Joe did it. I think that's really important because I think so many people are afraid of stepping in there. So I just want to commend you on that. This has been an incredible conversation, and you've given us so much practical stuff. I honestly want to have a whole other hour-long conversation just around Joe Brown and how Joe Brown became Joe Brown. But give me this before you leave here. Who or what has been like the biggest impact on you in becoming this servant leader that anyone listening to this absolutely knows you are 100% this servant leader? Who or what has been that big impact for you?
And this might be a little longer answer than you were hoping for. But it goes back to my childhood. My grandparents were incredible people, and they were hardworking, honest, good people that taught me a work ethic from a young age. And I never wanted to disappoint them in anything that I did. And so that really helped shape me. And as a young person growing up I grew up on a ranch. In my younger years before we moved to Colorado in southeastern Oklahoma, and from there moved to Colorado, and I went to a really small high school, and we had some great coaches and some coaches that were questionable. And they helped show me kind of the ropes that was with it. And as I went to college, I knew that playing at any level was not a possibility. But I wanted to get an education, wanted to have an opportunity, and my first coaching opportunity came when I was still in college. I was working for the city of Greeley, and in the adult sports area, I was officiating basketball and football and softball, and listening to a lot of interesting conversations. And our coordinator at the time, she was an assistant girls basketball coach at Roosevelt High School, and they had just hired a new head coach, Randy Longoria. And they said, "Hey, we're looking for a C team girls coach. Would you be interested?" I said, "Absolutely. Don't care how much it paid or what, nothing. Just I'm in." And I was 19, and fortunately, I was a little bit more mature for my age, and that was where I got my start. Is Randy believed in me and gave me that opportunity, and I coached there for a few years. And a teaching job came up later in that same building, and the AD came up to me one day. She was about to retire, and the track coach was going to be the new athletic director. And she came up to me about a week before the season started and says, "Hey, I need to talk to you. Her name's Linda Clip." And she said, "I want you to know that you're going to be the head track coach. I need you to get ready for that. And here's what you need to do it." "Linda, I've never coached track in my life. I ran it, but I don't know anything about it." She goes, "It'll be fine. I'm going to help coach you through it." And she said, "Joe, when you first came here to Roosevelt, you told me that someday I'm going to be a head coach here. And that has always stuck with me." I have no recollection of that conversation, but she came and she bought really into me and helped me. And, John Bruce, our principal at the time, helped push me. And then I got me involved with the Coaches Association. As they said, we needed some younger people that were a part of it. Um, so I came in as a director, and I got to meet great people like our current executive director, Becky Mudd, Hall of Fame basketball coach Dick Cotty, winningest basketball coach in Colorado history, Chris Brown, no relation, but our winningest football coach in Colorado history. And all these great coaches started pouring into me. I later became the basketball president and the president of the Coaches Association, and they helped grow me along the way. And then as I started to make that change into administration, our superintendent, Marty Foster, and our principal, Trevor Long, stuck their neck out and said, "No, this is the guy that we want to hire. We want you to apply for this job." I said, "I don't think I'm ready to be done coaching." He said, "You're just going to coach bigger kids, Joe. It'll be fine." And they continue to pour into me today. And we developed that and kept growing and working, and got on the CADA board of directors with the athletic director board of directors. And that's turned into opportunities of learning from the best athletic directors in the state and the country on how to do this job better, and coming in through it with a clear mind. And that's recently turned into being on the board of directors of the Activities Association for the state, and learning from that lens of it too. And our commissioner, Mike Kruger, who's just really the definition of a transformational leader, has really poured into me from that perspective as well and helped grow me. And in my new position, our superintendent, Don Haddad, and our district athletic director, Chase McBride, who called me about this job when he was leaving to go to the district. And I never thought I would leave Roosevelt. I thought I was going to be there for a while and maybe forever. And I'm so thankful that he looked at me and gave me the opportunity to come here. And our principal, Eric Roshkov, just continues to support me and push in those directions. So this isn't Joe Brown. There's a lot of people pouring into me and giving me opportunities. And you just try and serve through those opportunities and work as hard as you can.
And that's just a great encouragement for whoever's listening to this podcast, whether you're a coach, assistant coach, you know, administrator, at whatever level, like everyone's having an impact, right? And so it's just that's a beautiful story, beautiful way to capture everything and to close things out there. Thanks so much for being here, Joe. And you don't have to give your phone number out. You've already given out to 1,500 people this year, but we if it's okay with you, we might throw out your email there for people that want to reach out and ask questions. Would that be okay?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
coach.joe.brown@gmail.com. I got that one early. I don't think I could probably get that one now. So email me anything that you need. I will gladly do that. And if you email me, I will give you my cell phone number. of whatever you need in those conversations, because what we do here, it can be replicated, it can be done other places, and sometimes we just need somebody to bounce ideas off of. And as part of my servant leadership is I want to help as many people as possible, not just the coaches in our building or the 1,500 kids in our building, but how do we continue to push that across the state and the country? So shoot me an email. I'd be happy to talk with anybody or have those conversations, and I will give you my cell phone number.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely appreciate you, and you've helped bring TOC to every new coach in the state of Colorado through helping to partner with your activities association, your coaches association. So I appreciate your collaboration with TOC, and thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you guys for all that you do as well.
All right, that's it for our conversation with Joe. I was honestly ready to talk to him for another hour. I wanted to learn more about his leadership journey. I wanted to hear more stories about their incredible culture. And I wanted to ask for his advice on a host of challenges that we see come up time and time again in my work with athletic directors. I was recently coaching an athletic director of a large university, and he landed on this vision of becoming the breeding ground for transformational coaches. Now, that sounds awesome. Like, it's a bold, compelling vision. And yet what I've learned in my work with several athletic directors across the country in the U.S. these last few years, whether it's working with an athletic director at the University of Texas or to smaller high schools, in my work with these people, and also my conversation with Joe Brown, is just that this isn't easy work. It's not something that you do in one coach's retreat, in one workshop, or even in 1 year. It takes years to build this type of culture. But it is work that's worth doing. And when administrators like Joe Brown do this type of work, here's the thing: people want to coach in that type of environment. People want to play in that type of environment. People want to send their kids to that type of environment. And so hopefully you're as inspired as I am today by our conversation with Joe. That's it for today's episode of the Coaching Culture Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. If you found this episode valuable, we'd love for you to leave a review, but most of all, share it. Share it with some others that might find value in it, and it can be the start of a conversation, and that conversation could be the start of something really special within your organization, your club, your athletic department, or your team.